Hi, and welcome back. In this lesson, we will create a super cool logo animation for a made-up video war game. We will focus on learning the 3D world in After Effects and delve deep into the Cinema 4D renderer feature. We will also install a free plugin to help us create super cool neon stroke animation. Additionally, we will learn how to create exciting backgrounds using simple effects. There's a lot to cover, so let's not waste any time and jump right in. Hey there! Let's start by checking out how this logo is made in Illustrator. So, open the main folder we created for the course, then go into the AI folder and open the fourth logo. Now, to get the same panel arrangement, go to Window, then Workspace, and choose Automation. So, this design is split into different layers, just like the rest of the design we saw in this course. There's a background layer, and a main text layer with a 3D effect. This is a regular text layer written in the Belly font. If you didn't install it before the course, no worries, you can also use the Ezra or Montserrat fonts. And now, before we create the logo animation, as always, we need to think of an interesting way to animate it. That's why, as I always say, it's very important to create a rough sketch that matches the logo concept. So let's open the sketch idea for this logo, and see the short storyboard I created for this logo design. Firstly, I wanted to create a dramatic tone for this animation. Therefore, I decided to enter each letter one after the other, and not show the all logo at once. And since this is a logo for a video game about wars and battles, I thought it could be cool to create a dark atmosphere of war and fire. Alright, so after we plan the animation, let's open up After Effects and start designing the first scene. As always, we can close this window. And so we can all see the same panel layout, let's click on Default. Now let's create our first composition. We'll call it Logo Animation 4. And now, go to 3D Render. Since in this lesson, we will create real 3D objects, we need to change the render settings from Classic 3D to Cinema 4D. This way, we can give some depth to the text layers in the scene. Soon you will understand what I'm talking about. For now, let's go back to basic, and continue with the composition settings. We will work in the full HD format, which is 1920 pixels in width, and 1080 pixels in height. Next, change the frame rate to 24, and the composition duration to 20 seconds. Leave the composition background in black, and click OK. Now, let's import our logo into the project. So, click twice on the empty area in the project panel. Enter the AI folder, and select the fourth logo. Now, let's ensure we don't check this function and click on Import. Here, we already know that we need to choose composition, because we want this file in separate layers. Here, we choose layer size, because we want the layer boundaries to match the object's size, not the document's size. Now, click OK. And there you go, a new folder has been created with all the layers of the Illustrator file. Also, a new composition with the name of the Illustrator file was created automatically. When we enter it, we will see the logo divided into layers and organized exactly as it is in the original Illustrator file. Alright, let's close this pre-comp and get started with the lesson. But before that, let's not forget to save the project and give it a name. Now, let's find the folder we created for the lesson. Go into the AE folder and give a name to the After Effects project we are currently working on. You can click this project to sample the name, and change the extension to 4_Rise of Vikings. Once done, click on Save. Now I want to mention a few important notes. If you see the preview screen like this, don't worry. You see it this way because your caps lock key is on. Turn it off, and it'll go back to normal. Finally, make sure your computer is set to English, so the keyboard shortcuts we use in the course work properly. Great! Now I want us to insert the designed logo comp into our composition, scale it down, then move it here, and lock this layer. We will use this comp as a reference to create the logo in After Effects. Great! And now let's start designing the scene. we'll begin by creating the text layers for the logo. For this, we'll select the text tool and type the word rise. Now, let's double-click on the text to select all of it. And now, let's change the color of the word to this color. Next, let's see the details of this text in the original design. So let's go back to Illustrator and select this text to see its info, such as the font, font weight, and font size. Alright, and now, let's go back to After Effects, and, first of all, let's change the font to Belly Bold. For those who don't have this font, you can also use the Ezra or Montserrat font. Now, let's change the font size to 150. And click here to make all the letters uppercase. Click here as well to make them even bolder. Now, let's go to Paragraph and make sure our text is centered, and the writing direction is left to right. Now let's select the layer and press Ctrl D to duplicate it. Move this layer down, using the down arrow key, while holding Shift, and change the text to off. Then, let's set the font size to 80, and change the color to white. Next, let's select the Rise layer again and duplicate it using Ctrl D one more time. Move this layer down and change the text to Vikings. Now, let's change the color to match the red from the logo and set the font size to match the logo design. So first, let's select the letter G and set its size to 180. Now, select the letter S and set its size to 210. And finally, repeat the same on the other side of the text. Great! Now let's switch back to the Selection tool and center the anchor points on all the text layers. To do this, select all the layers and press Ctrl-Alt-Home. Next, let's go to Align, change it to Composition, and click here. Then, select only this layer and click here to center it within the composition. Now, press the apostrophe key to show the grid. Finally, let's move the rest of the layers in relation to the word off, so that all the layers are centered in the scene. Now, let's switch around the layers in the layer panel to match the order in the scene. In other words, the word Vikings will be at the bottom, the word Rise on top, and the word of in the middle. Now, let's create the two orange arrows in the logo. To do this, select the Pen tool. Now click here to ensure no layer is selected. And then, create a straight line in this area. So click once here. Hold Shift and create another point here. Then, let's change the color of the line to the orange from the logo. So grab the eyedropper and sample this color. Hit OK and change the stroke width to 25. Next, let's click here to remove the fill for this shape. And now, let's learn how to make the end of this line sharp. To do this, open this layer. Open Contents. Open Shape. Open Stroke. Now, let's scroll down a bit until we see the property called Taper. Let's open it. And now, let's set the end length to 100. OK, and now let's close this layer. Press Enter, and change the name to Stroke. Now let's duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl D. Right-click on it, go to Transform, and select Flip Horizontal. Next, let's go back to the Selection tool, and move this layer here. And with that, we've finished designing the logo from scratch in After Effects. Let's press Ctrl S to save the project before we move on to animate the text layers. And before we animate the text, let's organize our composition. For example, we can select these two layers and nest them into one composition. To do this, press Ctrl-Shift-C. Let's call it Strokes Comp. Ensure that both are selected, and hit OK. Now let's enter this composition and resize it, because we got too much empty and unnecessary space here. Question: how can we adjust the size of this composition? To do this, we need to access the composition settings. We'll do that using the shortcut Ctrl-K. Now, make sure Preview is selected, so we can see what we're doing. And now let's resize it. 600 by 100 looks good. Press OK, and return to our main composition, and apply the collapse function to this composition. In the meantime, we can turn off this layer so it won't interfere with us. We can also hide it from the layer panel using the shy function here. If you don't see this icon, you can click here. Alright, so let's hide this layer and activate the function by clicking the icon here. Now, we can't see this layer here. Don't worry, we can bring it back at any point in the project. Okay, let's set the preview screen back to fit, and start to animate the text layers. And we will do it in the next part. So see you there. Welcome back. As in our previous lessons, this time as well, we will animate the text using the text animators in After Effects. So first, let's turn off both of these layers and start with the word Vikings. But before that, we can unlock this layer and hide it from this panel as well. And now, to make the letters go outside of the scene, we need to open the layer, select the text here, open the Animate menu, and select this function called Enable Per Character 3D. As you can see, we have a small icon here that symbolizes that all the letters will now behave as 3D layers. Let's see what I mean. Click here, and create a new animator with the position property. As you can see, besides the value that moves the layer left and right, up and down, we have a new value with which we can move the layer backward and forward. If we hadn't selected the Enable Per Character 3D function, we wouldn't have gotten this movement axis. So, in order to make the letters move in 3D space, when animating text with animators, we must enable this function. Great, and now, to animate the text we gotta set the changing point for the position property. So change the values of the z-axis of the position, until the text goes outside of the scene. You can hold down the Shift key for larger movements. For me, it was -2380, but you might need to adjust this value depending on the font you're using. The main thing is to make sure the text is outside of the scene. Okay, and now let's open the range selector and advanced. And let's change the animator's shape to ramp up. That means when the offset is at a value of -100, the letters will be at the changing point we set. And when the offset is at a value of 100, the letters will be in their original position. And they enter the scene from the first letter. Great, and now we are ready to set keyframes and animate the text. Let's start at the beginning of the animation. Now change the offset to -100 and create the first keyframe. Next, let's move to second 4. Why specifically second 4? There's no special reason, just a personal preference. I just decided that the text will take 4 seconds to complete its entrance. Okay, and now, at this point in time, we'll change the offset to 100. Let's see what we've got. As you can see, it's challenging for After Effects to preview the scene, because we're currently working with the Cinema 4D renderer. To make it easier for After Effects to display our scene, we can reduce the preview quality from here to third, or even quarter. And when we watch it again, it will render much faster. Okay, and now let's change the velocity of this animation. As we've already learned, when working with text animators, we can do this by entering the numbers in these parameters. In ease high, we'll write 20, and in ease low, we'll write 80. Let's see how it looks. Looks nice. And now, let's add a nice rotation animation to the text. For this, we need to add additional properties to this animator. So select it, go to Add, then Property, and choose Rotation. And now, let's set the changing point. As you can see, when I rotate the text, it rotates from its bottom part. This happens because the anchor points of all the letters in this text layer are located at the bottom. To change this, let's open More Options, and change the position of the anchor point. Let's look at the letter V as we do this, because it's already at the end of its animation. Let's set it to -40. Once done, we can close this, and go back to rotating the text. Now, the letters rotate as they should, but I don't really understand in which direction they are rotating. To see what we're doing a bit better, we can change the scene's view. For this, let's click here and select Custom View 1. Now we see the entire scene from an angle that makes it easier to see where the text is rotating. I want the text to rotate from the bottom, so let's write -180 here. Now, let's go back to Active Camera. And now, because we have already animated the offset, this animation will also apply to the changing point we set for the rotation. Let's set the preview screen to fit and see what we've got. I think the text is rotating too much. That's not a problem. We just need to reduce the rotation. Let's write -90 and see how it looks. Great, that's already better. Awesome, we've just finished making the text move in 3D space, and now it's time to give it a more realistic 3D look. To make things easier, we'll go back to Custom View 1 again. Then, we'll move to the point where we can see all the text in the frame and switch the quality to full to see our work better. Next, we'll open the geometry options and increase the extrusion depth to 80. Now, let's change the color of the sides of the text. To do this, we must select the text and create an additional animator. So, go to Side, then Color, and choose RGB. Let's color the corners the same color as the text and then darken it a little. And now, we can add some shadows to the text to improve the look of it even more. For this, open the Material options and adjust the following parameters. Let's return to Active Camera, set the preview screen back to fit, and see how it looks. Let's place the time indicator here, and now, as you can see here, we created subtle shadows on the text. I think it looks great. Alright, and now, we need to create a similar animation for the next text layer. But instead of doing the process from scratch, we can copy the two animators that we created. Then paste them onto the word Rise. But before that, let's go to the beginning of the animation because one of our animators has keyframes. If we want the keyframes to start from the beginning of the timeline, we must stand with the time indicator here. Now let's press Ctrl V. And there it is. We can see that this text is already animated as needed. Let's just change the rotation direction. For this, let's go into the first animator and change the rotation to 90 degrees. Which is the opposite of the bottom text. Great, now let's add a 3D depth to this text as we did for the first one. So first, let's go to Geometry Options and add some 3D depth to this text. Now let's go forward in time to see the text in the scene. And now, let's go into the second animator and change the color on the sides. Let's choose the red color from the first text. Looks nice. Finally, let's also set the material options for this layer as for the previous one. And now, let's move to the last text layer. Select it, turn it on. Go to the beginning of the animation and press Ctrl V to paste the two animators onto it. Now, let's enter the first animator and change some parameters. So, first of all, we don't want this text to rotate at all. Therefore, we can delete the rotation. And now, I don't want this text to enter letter by letter. I want both letters to enter together. For this, we need to go to Advanced and change it to Words. Now, this text will be entered as a single word. Okay, and as you can see, the position parameters changing point is not good. We know that, because right now, we are standing at the beginning of the animation, and we can see this text, which is not what we want. We want this text to be out of the scene at the beginning of the animation. Therefore, we need to change the changing point of the position property in the first animator. Let's close Advanced and change it. All we need to do is change the value we set to position. Let's change the value so that this word enters the scene through the letter O. For this, our changing point needs to move a bit to the right. Continue to adjust both axes until it looks like the text has exited the scene through the letter O. Alright, now let's add a 3D depth to this layer as well. But this time, since the text is smaller than the other texts, let's set the extrusion depth to 40. Let's see how that looks. Looks great. Now, let's change the side colors. Finally, add some shadows to the text by adjusting the Material Options parameters. Now we have some cool shadows. Now, let's close the layers and press Ctrl S to save everything we've done so far. And now, let's change the quality to quarter and see the entire animation. I think we need to move the word Vikings a bit forward in time to create a small offset in the animation. For this, let's select this layer and drag it to frame number 6. Let's see how it looks. Alright, now let's make our scene look even more interesting by creating a new camera. To create a new camera, right-click here, go to New, and select Camera. For the camera type, choose one node camera, and for the lens size, select 15mm. Then click OK. Now, let's activate the transparent background of the preview screen and set the quality to full so we can see what we're doing a bit better. Now, if I turn the camera on and off, you will notice that now, thanks to the camera, we get a slightly more interesting angle for our text. You can notice this in the parts where the text enters the scene. Alright, now, as we can see in the original logo, the word Vikings appears at a slightly different angle than ours. Let's adjust that. To do this, let's select this layer, press R, to see the rotation properties, and now let's rotate the layer on the x-axis. Let's enter -5. Next, let's also rotate the word rise. This time, we'll enter 5 on the x-axis. Okay, this looks great. It's a good time to press Ctrl S to save the project one more time before moving forward. And now, let's animate the orange arrows. For this, first let's click on the shy function icon to reveal the hidden layers. Now, let's disable the function for the layers. We can delete this layer now. Next, let's bring the black background to see what we are doing a bit better. Now, let's turn on this pre-comp and learn how to animate the arrows. So, first things first, let's enter the composition. And now, to animate strokes in After Effects, we need to select the contents and add an effect called Trim Paths to this layer. Open the effect, make sure you're at the beginning of the timeline, and change the end parameter to 0, and create the first keyframe with this value. Now, let's move to the second number 2, and change the value to 100. Now, select the keyframes and press F9. Then, press the Alt key and click on one of the keyframes twice. Here, we'll write 85 for both the width and height and hit OK. Let's see how it looks now. OK, and now let's apply this effect to the second arrow. So select the effect, press Ctrl C, now select the second arrow, make sure you at the beginning of the timeline, and hit Ctrl V to paste the effect on this layer. You can press U to see the keyframes. And there it is, we finished creating the animation for the arrows. Okay, now let's go back to the main composition and time the arrow animation to match what's happening in the scene. Let's start the arrows just a moment before all the text finishes its animation. At the 3-second mark. We can lower the quality and see how it looks. The entry of the arrows looks good, but I noticed that the entry of the word off isn't good. I'll explain what I mean. Let's go to the point in time when this word starts entering the scene. As you can see, the entry of this word doesn't happen through the letter O as we wanted. But why is this happening? We positioned the letter correctly earlier. It's happening because we now have a camera with a 15mm lens in the scene, which causes a slight distortion of the letters. To fix this, all we need to do is go back to the first animator of this layer, and slightly adjust the change point in the position parameter of this animator. First, stand at the point in time where you can see the text. And now, move this layer a bit to the right. Let's see if the problem is resolved. Looks better. You can change this value a bit using the arrow keys on the keyboard. Okay, that's good enough. And now, once we're done with the animation and have resolved any issues, we'll need to put all the layers into one composition. This way, we can easily add more layers and effects to the main composition later on. So, select all the layers and hit Ctrl-Shift-C. Then, name the composition, Main Title Animation, make sure both options are selected, and click OK. Now, for faster work in After Effects, we can change the settings of this composition back to Classic 3D. This is because we won't create objects with 3D volume in this composition. So, there's no need to continue working on this composition with the Cinema 4D renderer. So let's press Ctrl-K to enter this comp settings. Now let's go to 3D renderer and change it back to Classic 3D. So now, this comp has a Cinema 4D render, and this comp has the Classic 3D. With this done, let's move on to the next part and learn how to create some awesome fire strikes. So, see you in the next one. Welcome back. Now, we will learn how to create the fire sparks absolutely from scratch. First, let's turn off this layer for now, set the quality to full, and start creating the fire sparks. To create this effect, first, we need to create a new solid. So right-click here, go to New, and select Solid. Let's change the name to Sparkles, adjust its size to match our composition, color it black, and click OK here, and here. In the next step, we go to Effects and search for CC Snowfall. Add it onto the solid layer, and now, let's adjust the effect parameters until we achieve the desired result. Let's zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing a bit better. Okay, so first, let's lower the birth rate to 500. Next, change the size to 15. Then, in variation, we'll type 100 for maximum randomness in the sparkle sizes. After that, we can significantly increase the scene depth. Let's enter 21,000 here. Great, let's see what we have so far. Okay, as you can see, the particles are moving very slowly. So, let's increase the speed to 1500. This looks better. Now, let's add maximum randomness to the particle's speed. That way, some will move fast, and some will move slowly. Alright, looking good so far. Next, let's set the wind to 1000, so the particles move to the side. And let's change the randomness of the wind to 10. This creates a sense of movement and motion like real fire sparks. Alright, moving on. Now, for spread, set it to 10. Okay, now let's turn on this precomp. And to see the precomp with the effect, we need to uncheck this checkbox. And now, we'll see the effect along with the scene. Alright, let's turn off the scene again. And now let's go back to the effect, and under Extras, let's change the ground level to 10. This way, the particles will only fly up to the middle of the composition. Soon, when we color them, you'll understand what I mean. Okay, and now, let's set the random seed to 10 for a more random motion. Now we can color the sparkles. We'll do this using the gradient ramp effect. Let's add this effect to our solid and change the colors. We can color the first color in red, and the second one in yellow. Now let's position the yellow color here. Let's see how it looks. Looks nice. Next, let's improve our sparkles look even more with another effect called glow. We can close these settings and adjust the two parameters of the glow effect. Set the radius to 15 and the intensity to 2. Zoom in to see how it looks up close. And now, let's select the glow effect and press Ctrl D to duplicate it. But here, we'll change the glow radius to 50. Now, let's close all the effects and see what we've got. Alright, this looks good. The last thing we need to do is flip this layer. So right-click on it, go to Transform, and select Flip Vertical. This way, we get the illusion like the sparkles going from the ground up. Now, let's enhance the look of it even more with the CC lens effect. So find the effect, and drag it onto the solid. Now change the size to 170, and see how that looks. Now, the sparkles look a bit distorted at the edges of the scene. However, it's important not to overdo this effect, or it might make things look weird. Our maximum this time is 170. I think it looks great. But I think we need to darken the edges of the sparkles. For this, let's open the gradient and move the red color points slightly upwards. I think we can also tone down this color a bit. Something like that. Okay, now let's turn on this pre-comp. And there you have it. The fire sparkles blend perfectly with the text animation. Now let's move on to the start of the animation and animate the sparkles. For this, temporarily turn off this pre-comp. Now, let's open the snowfall effect and adjust this parameter. So let's set it to 0 at the beginning of the animation. Now, let's create a keyframe with this value. Next, press U to see the keyframe on the layer. Now, let's move to the second number 2 and change the value to 300. Let's see how it looks. Alright, I think it looks awesome. Now let's turn on this pre-comp and learn how to create the Viking symbol animation. We'll create this animation using a free plugin that we'll download and install together in just a few moments. So, let's say we've decided to add a cool design element to our animation that we found on the internet, which relates to the concept of our company branding and its logo. And after the clients approve adding a new graphic that does not exist in the original logo design, we can download the graphic asset from the internet and save it in our assets folder. Now, let's go to the assets folder and enter the FreePic folder. Here, we'll enter a folder called Viking symbol. Right-click on the EPS file and choose to open it in Illustrator. And now, let's get this design ready for some animation. First, let's get rid of the black background because we don't need it. Now, let's select the entire shape and color it in black. Next, let's change the name to something more standard so that we won't have any issues in the animation. Let's call it Vikings Icon. Now, let's go to File, click on Save As, choose to save it on your computer, and save it in the same folder of this asset. Just make sure to save it as an Illustrator file. Finally, let's change the name and click on Save. Alright, and now, let's get back to our project and import the file we just saved. So head over the project panel and double-click on the empty space here. Now, let's locate the folder of this graphic asset. And now, as you can see, we can't see the file we saved right now. If you can't see the file, I'll explain how to solve this problem in a minute. Those who can see the file, it's the new Illustrator file. Simply select it and click Import, then wait until we reach the same point as you. It'll take just a couple of seconds. Alright, let's move out of here. Sometimes, even though everything seems fine in Illustrator, the saved file may malfunction. In such cases, you can simply delete the problematic file. Next, go back to Illustrator and save it again as an Illustrator file, but this time in a different folder without changing the name. Now, find the folder where you saved the file. And there it is. We can see that the file is valid. And before importing this into our project in After Effects, let's change the name. Once done, switch back to After Effects. Before importing the file, ensure that you've put it in the intended folder. Finally, you can conveniently drag the file into your project. Great, and now we have all come to the same point, and here in this case, we can choose footage as there is only one layer in this document. We don't need After Effects to create a separate composition for a single layer. Next, choose Merge Layers for the same reason. And here, we see the Illustrator file in the project panel. Let's drag this file to our composition, turn off the other layers, turn on the transparent background, and you can close this panel as well. Now, we are going to learn how to animate it using a very cool plugin. But before we install the plugin, let's go to Edit, then Preferences, and enter Scripting and Expressions. And now, let's make sure all the settings are exactly like mine. If they are, hit OK. Save the project with Ctrl+S, and close it, so the plugin will work properly. OK. And now, let's find the plugin we need to install. You can click the link in the PDF file, located in the folder of this course. Or open Google, and search for Sabre After Effects. Now, go to the first website, scroll down a bit until you see the plugin download. I will download the version for Windows. The installation process for Mac users is exactly the same. Alright, now choose a folder on your computer to save the plugin. I will save it in the folder where I download all the After Effects plugins. Now, let's extract this file. Once done, you can delete this file. Now, let's go into this folder and open its installation. Let's press I agree. If you are using previous versions of After Effects, then choose Custom and select your version. Alright, let's click Install and Finish. Great, and now we are ready to move on to the next part, when we learn how to animate the Vikings icon using this plugin. It's going to be awesome, so see you in the next part. But before you dive into the next lesson, I highly recommend that you take a 10-minute break. Get up from your chair, do some light stretching, and drink a glass of water. This will help you to recharge your brain for the next lesson. Welcome back. So, after we've all installed the plugin, let's get back to our project. So, head over to the AE folder and open the project. And now, to use the plugin on our layer, we first need to trace its path. And to do this, first, we need to select the layer. Go to Layer and select Auto Trace. Auto Trace works by analyzing the image and creating a bunch of paths based on the edges and color contrasts in the image. Okay, so let's click on it. And now, make sure that all the settings match mine. Make sure to uncheck Invert. And hit OK. And now, we have our shape, which is made up of many masks. We can delete this layer now. Let's turn off the transparent background. And now, let's select the layer and press M to see all the masks on it. We can expand this panel. As you can see, After Effects created a keyframe for each mask. We don't need them, so let's select all of them and delete them. By pressing Backspace or Delete. Scroll down to make sure you selected all the keyframes. Now let's select one mask, press Ctrl+A to select all of them, and close them all at once. Once done, you can close the layer. Now, to have better control over the effect we'll create soon, we need to copy all of these masks and paste them onto a solid. So, let's create a new solid. We'll call it Vikings icon. Make sure it's the same size as the composition. Color the solid in black, and hit OK. Now, let's select this layer and press M to reveal all the masks. Select the first mask, press Ctrl A to select them all. Now press Ctrl C to copy them. Next, let's close this layer. Select the solid and press Ctrl V to paste the masks onto this solid. You can delete this layer now. And now, we can add the saber effect. Let's go to the Effects panel and look for the new effect we installed called Saber. Drag the effect onto the new solid. And let's adjust some parameters. First, open Customize Core, and make sure the effect references the masks on this layer. Second, go to Alpha Mode, and change it to Mask Glow. For now, let's turn off the glow, because I want to show you a handy shortcut. Let's zoom in a bit, and let's talk about the shortcut. As you can see, we have a lot of mask paths on this layer. Sometimes it can interfere with our work when creating detailed path animations. Luckily for us, there is a cool shortcut to hide these paths. Press Ctrl-Shift-H. This shortcut is used to toggle the visibility of layer controls, such as masks, effect controls, and transform properties in the composition panel. This way, we can see what we're doing better. Okay, and now, we can bring back the glow. And let's start changing the parameters of the effect. Set the core size to 0.50. Next, set the glow bias to 1. For the glow spread, you can set it to 0.8. Finally, let's change the color to bright orange. And now, to animate the path, we need to set keyframes for the end offset. Let's go to the beginning of the timeline, and create a keyframe at a value of 0. Now press U to see the keyframe we've created. Move to the 4th second. Now change the value to 100. Now we have some cool reveal effect animation. And now, let's select the keyframes and press F9 to ease them. Let's make it more interesting by animating mask evolution. But instead of rotating this parameter with keyframes, we can do it more smartly. Question: what should we do to rotate this parameter without creating keyframes? Let's do it with an expression. So first, to create a new expression for this parameter, we need to hold the Alt key and click once on the parameter's stopwatch. Now let's write time *5 and see how it looks. But as you can see, we are not seeing the rotation animation we just created. It's because the shape has reached its maximum reveal. Let's fix the issue by changing the last keyframe for the end offset parameter, which is responsible for creating the reveal effect. So, let's stand on this keyframe and change it to 20. Now the shape's reveal doesn't reach its full extent. Therefore, we can see the rotation motion on this path. Alright, now let's open the flicker. Change the intensity to 100 and the speed to 10. That means we now have a small flicker animation on this path. And with that, we're done with this effect. We can close the effect. Now let's turn on all the layers and move this layer down. And now let's create a background for our scene. For this, let's press Ctrl Y and create a new solid. Change the name to BG. Make sure it's the same size as the composition. Leave the color black and hit OK. Next, let's add the gradient effect to this solid. To know which colors to use, let's go to the project panel and drag the background layer to our scene as a reference. Now, select the solid and go back to Effects Controls to see the effect on it. So first, let's sample the right colors. And now, we can see that the gradient here is circular. Let's change it for our solid as well. Great! Now, we can delete this layer. And now, let's position the gradient colors. But as you can see, we can't see them. That's because we previously hid the layer visibility using the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-H. So, let's press that shortcut again to bring back the layer controls. Now, we can move the colors either from here or directly from the point itself. Let's create something like this. Now let's place the background beneath all the layers. As you can see, we can't see it at all. That's because, above it, we have our solid with the icon. To see the background in the icon, we need to change the blending mode of the icon layer. I'll show you what I mean. Let's click here to see the options for different blending modes of the layers. Now, let's open the blending modes for the solid and choose a blending mode called Add. And there you have it. In my opinion, the background should be a bit darker. Let's go back to the gradient effect and darken its color a bit. And now, let's make the text animation a bit more interesting by creating a small camera movement. To do this, let's enter this composition. Now, let's select the camera and press P to see its position. Let's move to the point in time where the text completes its animation, and create the first keyframe with the current value, because at this point, we want the camera to be in this position. Now, let's go to the beginning of the timeline. And now, to see what we are doing with the camera, click here, and choose 2 views. In this panel, we can see our entire scene from a different perspective. We see it from the top. It's much more convenient for us to move the camera forward like this. And now, as the text enters, the camera moves away from it. Let's lower the quality for a moment, to check the camera movement we've just created. Alright, and now let's go back to the main composition and create a scale animation for the icon. So select it, and press S to open the scale for this layer. Now, let's stand at the beginning of the timeline. Change the size to 150, and create the first keyframe. Now, let's move to the second number 5, to the point in time where the camera finishes its animation, and increase the size of this layer to 180. Let's lower the quality here as well, and see how it looks. I think it looks awesome. Now let's press Ctrl S to save the project before we move on. One last thing, let's go back to the gradient in the background and change the ramp scatter to 100, as we learned in the previous lesson. This should improve the appearance of the gradient. And now, let's move on to the next part, where we will improve the look of the scene and render the final animation. See you there. Welcome back. Let's start with improving the look of the scene. But before that, let's bring the quality back to full. Turn off the grid. Isolate this layer so we only see it. Now, let's get a bit closer and enlarge this panel. And now, right-click on the text layer, go to Layer Styles, and select Inner Shadow. Just like we did in the previous lesson, let's change the color to white, set the opacity to 100, and the blending mode to screen. There you go, we've created a cool highlight. Now, let's choose a more proper color for the design. Choose some orange color, so it will blend with the icon and the fire stroke we have in the back. Next, let's activate the global light. Change the distance to 3 and the size to 2. This creates a cool backlight effect from behind the text. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm talking about. As you can see, it adds a nice touch to the design. Alright, and now, let's isolate the background as well, to see how it looks with the background colors. Now, let's add another effect to improve the look even more. Go to the Effects panel, type Sweep, and drag the effect called CC Light Sweep onto the text layer. Now, let's animate this effect to create more exciting animation when the text enters the scene. Let's find the point in time when we want the sweep to start. Let's say from the 4-second mark. Now, let's create the first keyframe for the parameter responsible for the position of the sweep. Press U to see the keyframe we created. Now move to the 7-second mark and move the sweep here. Let's see how it looks. It looks great. Now let's stand at the time point where we see the sweep on the text and fine-tune it a bit. First, let's change the color to yellow. Now let's adjust the other parameters. When you want to learn about a new effect, play with it and change the various parameter values while looking at your scene. This way, you'll understand what each parameter controls and, more importantly, how it affects the appearance of your scene. Okay, now I want to make an important note. As you can see, the initial position of the sweep is here. If we go a few seconds back in time, it seems that the text collides with the sweep at this point. This means that until second 3, the position of the sweep should be outside the scene. So we won't see it when the text is in this position. The sweep will start entering the scene only from second 3. Then, it will perform the animation we set up earlier. Alright, and now let's select the effect and duplicate it using Ctrl-D. We can close the first effect. Now, we'll use the second effect only to add an additional highlight to the text. So, let's click here and remove all the keyframes we created. Now, let's place the sweep in the center and rotate it by 90 degrees. Let's also change the color a bit and increase the edge thickness. We can zoom in a bit to see what we're doing. We'll set this to 3. Now let's increase the sweep intensity to 400 and reduce the sweep intensity to 60. And then width to 60 as well. Now we have additional highlights on the text. This is how it looks without the duplicated effect, and this is how it looks with it. In my opinion, it looks better this way. As you can see, we got some nice highlights in the middle of the title. Okay, let's bring back all the layers, and now I want to create a drop shadow for our text layer. This will make it look better since there isn't enough contrast between the text and the shape behind it. To make a drop shadow effect on a layer, we need to search for it in the effects panel and drag it onto the layer. But if we have a light sweep effect on the same layer, it can make the drop shadow look kinda weird. As you can see, it looks more like some kind of glow. It's going to look like that, even if I move the drop shadow effect above the light sweep. Let's remove it, and now, I will show you how to create a proper drop shadow effect along with the light sweep. To do this, right-click on the text layer composition. Go to Layer Styles and select Drop Shadow. Now, let's open the effect and adjust the parameters. Okay, I think this looks good enough. Now, let's make a minor color correction to the entire scene. To do this, let's create a new adjustment layer and apply an effect called Curves to it. Let's bring this part of the handle down a bit, and this part up a bit. That way, we created more contrast in the scene. Next, let's copy the effect name and paste it onto the adjustment layer. But now, I notice that the sweep looks too small. To change it, we can go back to the first light sweep effect and change its shape. I'll leave this one as linear. And now, I want to show you a cool trick to make the scene look more interesting. Since we have fire strike in the background, we can animate the inner shadow effect we added earlier, to create a feeling like our text is affected by the fire strike behind it. Let me show you what I mean. First, let's select this layer and press the U key twice, so that we can see all the parameters and effects on it. Let's close all the effects here until we get to inner shadow. Now, let's create an expression in the opacity. For this, let's hold the Alt key and click once on the opacity stopwatch. Now, let's write the following expression here. Once done, let's click here to finish the action. Let's isolate this layer to see how it looks. notice that the inner shadow is now flickering, giving us the feeling that the light is coming from the fire sparks behind it. Alright, and now let's create the outro animation for the whole scene. Let's start with the title animation. So, first, let's go into the text composition. We can go back to view 1. Now stand at the 9-second mark, when the text finishes its animation, and trim the work area to that point using the N key. Now, right-click the work area and select Trim CompTO Work Area. Once done, let's go back to the main composition and duplicate this pre-comp. So select it, and press Ctrl D. Then, right-click on the new pre-comp, go to Time, and select Time Reverse Layer. Now, this pre-comp will function as our text outro animation. We can delete the first sweep we have here because we don't need it to go over the text again. Let me explain why. Let's move this pre-comp to the end of the first pre-comp. Make sure both pre-comps are aligned perfectly side by side. And since this pre-comp is essentially the reverse of the original pre-comp, we see the sweep going backward. I don't like that, so I suggested we delete the first sweep. Okay, now let's get to the end of this pre-comp and press N to trim the work area to here because we don't need to render everything after this. Next, let's create an outro animation for the sparkles. Let's select the layer and press U to reveal the keyframes on it. Now, let's copy these keyframes and paste them at the end of the animation. Now, right-click on one of them, go to Keyframes Assistant, and select Reverse Keyframes to reverse the animation. Finally, let's move these keyframes here. Once done, let's select the icon layer, press T, and create a fade-out animation at the second number 7. So create the first keyframe at this point in time, with the current value. Now, move to the second number 9, and change the opacity to 0. Finally, let's ease these keyframes. Now, let's lower the quality and see how it looks. I think it's great. And now, let's set the quality to full and prepare to render the scene. Just before rendering, let's clean up the software to avoid unexpected issues during rendering. To do that, go to Edit, Purge, and select all memory and disk cache. Then, hit OK, and wait a few seconds. Great! Now let's organize the project panel. Create a folder called Assets, and drag the folders with the logo layers and the solid folder into it, and the Viking icon file. Next, create a new folder called Precomps, and drag all the precomps we created during the project into it, except for the main composition, which we can tag with a different color. Next, let's close these precomps. Press Ctrl S to save the project. And now, press Ctrl M to access the render panel. In output mode, choose H.264 40 Mbps and render the animation to our renders folder. Check the name. Press Save and then render. And now, wait for a moment. Great! And now let's see what we got. It looks excellent. You should be proud of yourselves, as you have learned a lot today. And now, let's go back to our project and close it. This time we don't need to organize the project, because we already did it before rendering, so just close the program and save the project. Remember to close Illustrator as well. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I look forward to seeing you in the final lesson of this course. We'll create a super cool logo animation for a made-up animal sanctuary by diving deep into working with a camera in a 3D space. It's going to be awesome, so see you there. Hi there! I hope you found the lessons helpful and learned some new and interesting things. To better remember everything we covered, I highly recommend practicing by completing this homework assignment. Your task is to recreate this cool animation. You have the freedom to change the colors and add any additional graphics you like. And whenever you face any issues or have some questions, feel free to check the AE project file to see the steps I took. Additionally, you can always reach out to me for help. Good luck!